Hey everybody, welcome to Swedenborgian Life Live. Today we're going to be talking about ghosts, haunted gardens, and edible fear. What more could you possibly want to talk about? My name is Curtis Childs, and here with me is someone who I have no one I'd rather talk about that stuff with than Dr. Jonathan Rose. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Nice grammar, Curtis.
Yeah, was that a semicolon or something? Now, this time last week, we were on about this show having to do with ghosts.
Yeah,
it was
that's right.
called Do Ghosts Exist? Look at that fear in the eyes there. And that show was pretty out there, right? We were talking about ghosts and spirits, and you'd think we'd be trying to correct and go like back into the mainstream.
Dial it back a little bit.
Yes, and somebody you at home may have said, you recommended our show to a friend, and like, no, this is cool, they're fun. Oops, that last episode, no, the next one's gonna be better. Unfortunately, we're just gonna go deeper. What we wanna do here in the live show is expand that conversation, look more into the stuff we didn't even have time for in the other one, but hopefully pull some stuff out that makes life better.
Yeah,
that's the whole point, right?
That's it.
And we're going to do it with a sense of order. We're going to do our standard icebreaker. We're going to ask you guys a question, get your live response, and at the end we'll answer the same question just because fair is fair.
Seems fair.
And then we're going to hear more about Swedenborg's encounters with ghosts and spirits. And he doesn't, of course, call them ghosts, but it matches up. And every time you hear about a Swedenborg encounter, you learn something about, what do you want to call it? Metaphysics. There's always some kind of lesson about the world that he saw.
That's right.
In there. And then we're going to hear from a couple of guests on this topic. We're going to respond to some live questions in a Q&A with the audience. So, I mean, what do we got to lose here? Our jobs. Okay, Let's get ready. We're going to start with the icebreaker now. What's the point of the icebreaker? I'd say overall, it's just to avoid any awkward silences. And to have you at home in the chat room not have those same kind of silences. We want you typing it in. We're going to be compiling those as we sit. And at the end, we'll be hearing, because we want to know, and we know what we think, but we're still going to tell each other, but we want to know what you think. How are you guys dealing with the same questions that we're getting? And the question that I've hyped up a lot is this one right here. Have you had a time when you saw a ghost or felt consciously visited by a spirit? What was it like? And so because we did the last thing, one of our tent poles in the last show, metaphors are tricky. Like, is that right? Is that what people use that for? But listen, the reason we're talking about ghosts and spirits is because people are reporting these experiences.
Yeah, a lot of people, right.
But I wonder, are we part of a lot of people? That's what the question is. Are you part of a lot of people at home? So I'll open it up with an answer that's sure not to disappoint. No. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that I've never had like a full-on, I'm seeing a being. And there's some stuff that was a little close. There was one time, I don't know why, I was looking into the kitchen, and this was many years ago, and I was like, what is that? Is that what? And I was like, it turned out to be nothing, but it was vivid enough that I still. And I've had stuff like.
Did you get goosebumps or anything?
Oh yeah, I had all that stuff, man. It was pretty great. But I also had the other side, like the vivid dreams where somebody that I cared about who had died. I talk with them, or people that I know, and that's sort of the other side of it. But I certainly haven't had the kind of stuff we're talking about on this program. So there, I said it. Hey man. I'm an armchair expert on this kind of stuff. Expert? Oh. What about you?
Your humility is admirable. I've had a couple, not many. Like when I've been in full waking state, I've never seen anything like that. But a couple of times I've felt a presence, and sometimes it was somebody I thought I knew who it was, and sometimes it was just like something spooky and weird that sort of rattled me, and
Good. Okay, so fringe stuff. But stuff nonetheless. And I want to hear from all of you, because apparently it's quite common to have had an experience like that.
Yeah, that's right.
They do these polls and stuff.
A lot of people report that, that's right.
So I'd love to hear from you. Have you, and what's a little bit about it. All right, so ice is broken, man. I feel like I don't feel any anxiety anymore about this whole show, so might as well test me out.
No more awkward silence.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, let's go to part two.
All right.
I'm feeling extra spiritual, and I'm not sure. Oh, it could be
What do you think
partially
it is?
because we're in the middle.
You sense, like I smell something. Do you?
I just did that smell actually because I do like smelling flowers.
I
enough
do,
that I was like,
especially daffodils.
even if I'm on air, I'm gonna pull it off. We're in a garden, and there's a reason we're in a garden. It's because we're going to be looking at 2 encounters that Swedenborg had that had to do with gardens. And Swedenborg's garden was a pretty meaningful place to him, right?
It's true. He had been, for most of his life, he was a bachelor and he did not own any property.
Okay.
But when he was 55 years old, interestingly, right at the time that he started to have spiritual experiences, he bought this property, just 1.2 acres in Södermalm, this island in Stockholm. And
sounds like a nice
he had
neighborhood.
to travel abroad, and he got people to design it and landscape it and all that kind of thing. And that's where he lived. Basically, that was his home base for the rest of his life, and where he wrote most of these books.
All these books that we feature on this show were penned, a lot of them, in this little garden house.
Yeah,
right?
That's right in that summer house in the garden. That's
so we have 2 experiences that come out of this garden here, and positive and negative. We're going to cover both. Yep.
Yeah, he had both kinds of experiences with spirits or what have you in his garden.
Yeah, but I'm feeling a little bad because we probably already lost some people because they're like, wait, what do you mean had experiences? What is a spiritual experience in the first place? And we're certainly not going to satisfy a skeptic with this, but we are going to give a little framework because last show we spent a good amount of time. Remember, we had this whole metaphor with this bonsai tree where we talked about this as a correspondence. Like the way a plant is, these flowers, that tree is showing us just that there are 2 worlds and how interconnected they are.
Yeah, they connect right there at the ground level, don't they? So the analogy was that spiritual things are up above there, and then earthly things below, including our own mind, our body, this world, and so on. But they're connected to each other. And the top has to stand on that root. They're connected. And
so intimately, they're exchanging things all the time, and they're almost part of a single, functioning system. And it's not just, though, these 2 levels of reality, it's also the people in them, right?
They're populated, that's right. So the upper levels, there'll be angels, and then in the middle, spirits, and then there are people down here. And we're all connected through these correspondences that Swedenborg talks about.
With this much interplay and interchange happening between the worlds, sometimes there's there's constantly a connection through thoughts and feelings. I mean, Swedenborg's model of consciousness asserts that everything that goes on in our minds is really us communicating with the spiritual world. That's sort of the basis, the subconscious, if you will.
That's right. Whether they know it or not, whether we know it or not, there is a communication that Swedenborg found that goes in our thinking and feeling. And so different kinds of thoughts and different kinds of feelings attract different kind of influence.
Right, and as you might expect, the more negative, superficial, self-centered you are, the more you attract that kind of spiritual influence, and vice versa. Like, being loving pulls angels around, which is not unreasonable, right? But what is unreasonable is that, according to Swedenborg, there are times when the spiritual senses, like we have physical senses, eyes and ears and all that, but the spiritual senses open, and this is when you get overt spiritual experiences.
Under various different kind of circumstances, that may be fairly rare, but something leaks through and you actually see,
because of
hear or feel or whatever.
Any of the above, and because of Swedenborg's the state of his sort of spirit-body connection or whatever, those experiences for him were actually quite common. So we're going to talk about a couple of his stories, and usually, ghost stories, where do they happen? Abandoned house or a cemetery, but he was having these encounters in his garden.
In his garden, in his garden. And actually, it seems like the first experience he had of this type in his garden was quite negative.
Yep, and I didn't say this before we started because I didn't know if you would show up or not, and likewise to the audience, but we're going to start with the scary one. Because you remember, last show was pretty scary, and we did this, I don't know if you remember, whoever this actor was, just amazing, but depicting Swedenborg had this session where evil spirits were messing with him and troubling him, and he was seized with all kinds of fear, but yet simultaneously shown it's going to be okay. So he's kind of learning their methods.
And he was told that these spirits were asserting that they had died in that place, and we're trying to fill him with horror. And
you might think, okay, well, sure, anybody who had an evil spirit encounter, it would be scary. But Swedenborg asserts that it's it's intentional. That evil spirits are not just scary, but they try to scare you.
Oh, they try to. So they really want to induce fear.
It's just like a person who is trying to scare you. It's not just a natural consequence, it's engineered. He talks about it in Spiritual Experiences 2072. And he says, there was a certain tract of garden, this is in his garden, this is the thing we're talking about, at which spirits had caused me to be frightened, because they did not want it to be cultivated.
It's a little bit like that teapot in the last show, isn't it? Where it's like they have opinions about this stuff that goes on in this world.
I wouldn't have called that, that he's saying that even though the worlds are separate, they can, no, don't mess with this particular piece of land.
Yeah, and it seems that although he says a certain tract of garden, I think it was before he purchased it, maybe when he was shopping and went and looked at it.
Right.
And they said, we don't want this cultivated.
And they even brought up dreadful thoughts, although the tract was beautiful, planted with trees. So they're trying to psych him out.
And when he says dreadful, we may just say, oh, that was dreadful,
No.
But I mean, I think he's talking like
horrific.
Terrifying, horrific kind of thoughts.
Because he had seen a lot by then. This mental image, just think if somebody just cut into the video right now and they just see these two guys like reading about spirits with a bunch of flowers on the table.
It's just beautiful, isn't it? What a great show.
Click-through rate. This mental image remained for when I portrayed that garden tract by a spiritual mental image 2 years later, then the spirits who are now around me began to shudder, as if they were suffering dreadful thoughts, because those dreadful fantasies that had been inspired earlier were being aroused. And so they were being frightened almost beyond endurance.
So it seems like this is a second set of spirits. 2 years later, he still has that mental image. Because it's true, when you get traumatized or something, when you feel extreme fear.
That's right.
Like you drive by that place again and you feel it again.
I have had it like a spot on a road I go on sometimes where somebody cut me off really close, and I get nervous when I get into that spot.
And so he's even just the thought of it and the mental image of it, he brings it up. And these other spirits who don't even know about the earlier incident are shuddering and going through all this trembling.
I therefore depicted to them how the matter stood, and that these were only illusions of evil spirits who had induced those dreadful things. And being instructed, they began to feel differently, and that horror departed.
Now, you see, you might think that because a spirit said something to you, it has to be the truth. I mean, I think some people think that.
Well,
right?
because there's a general pragmatic atheist assumption that a lot of us just kind of live by, which is like, there's nothing supernatural. So if something supernatural happened, and it seemed to have knowledge and intent, of course it knows what it's talking about because it's supernatural.
And you should surrender whatever it says to do or whatever it's trying to make you feel.
Yeah.
You should just go along with that.
But Swedenborg is saying, spirits lie all the time.
And so he is actually there talking to these spirits and calming them down about it. He says, oh no, those are just illusions brought up by evil spirits. It wasn't that, they were lying, basically.
And he's trying to calm other spirits down.
Yeah.
Are you with us?
Right.
He's trying to calm the other spirits down because they don't know the difference, because they're looking not at the garden, but at his memory, because his memory is spiritual.
And the emotions that came up at that point, even though he knew better,
Yeah. So the first group of spirits that was instilling that horror, they were bad, and they were trying to scare him as a tool to manipulate him, right?
Right.
But
and they seem to have that goal of we don't want this place cultivated.
Yeah.
We don't want this place getting all, it was like this before, let's say, and Swedenborg's envisioning this, and they say, I don't want that. This I can deal with.
Yeah.
This I love. I don't want that.
They don't want maybe the peace of mind that was going to bring, or they just don't like the essence of it, or they knew he was going to write all these books.
They had some premonition that he was going to call them out.
Yeah.
Because what did he write? He wrote about them, right?
And that someday it would lead to an internet show where they have the flowers on the desk, And so they're like, wait, for the good of art, please stop. And this may seem like it's an unnecessary or frivolous question, but what is that the only reason why evil spirits try to be scary? I mean, why? I mean, you could guess someone
What do they get out of it? Right?
Exactly. Is it just for kicks, or is there something more directional.
Like a schoolyard bully who just because I'm bigger than you, I
Yeah.
can, or something like that.
Well,
No, I think it's more, right?
yeah, I mean, it's great when I pose a question I know I'm going to be able to answer.
Good.
Because we're going to dive in here a little bit to revisit a buddy of ours who's named Jerry Marzinski. And you may have seen him on a number of shows previously, and he has a fascinating story. He's a licensed therapist, or was retired now, working in correctional facilities and state institutions, and he worked a lot with schizophrenic patients, or people who are hearing voices.
Psychotics. And
Yes.
That's right.
So people,
Right.
and he through just like asking them about their voices and what does the voice say when I say this, like sort of checking, like taking notes on what their phenomenon is that they're experiencing. He came to find a world that he thought really mirrored Swedenborg, and then through a couple other experiences he had, began to think, no, these are actually these voices that are plaguing these people and ruining their lives. These are these entities.
Yeah.
These are spirits. And
Yeah.
so, but he took that information and through other research and again experience found that okay, there's a purpose to the fear. That, and Swedenborg alludes to this a little bit, and Jerry's really fleshed it out. He says the spirits are trying to induce fear because they get something very particular out of it. So let's hear a little bit about what he had to say about how they try to induce fear, what they get out of it, and what that means for the rest of us who aren't hearing voices.
When I was in the PhD program, I asked the director of the program, I said, where do thoughts come from? And he looked at me like I was a Martian that fell out of a spaceship. He hadn't even thought about it, Now, Swedenborg, on the other hand, was very clear about where thoughts come from. They're not yours, especially these negative ones. And virtually every negative thought about yourself does not belong to you. It's been inserted into your mind, almost like a fishing hook or baited, and if you jump on it and you believe it, it reacts and injects toxic poisons into your mind, releasing a lot of negative emotional energy, right? And that just starts festering. So, if you realize that you can step back from those thoughts and watch them flow into your head, you can realize for yourself they're not yours. These are coming from somewhere else. If you adopt these thoughts that come in there as truths, they start festering and they get worse and worse and worse. Right? And they, depending on how badly abused and the history of the patient, they go from thoughts like we may have to, nightmarish thoughts that are beyond belief. They might start off saying, you're stupid, you're worthless, nobody cares about you. People are talking behind your back, they're plotting against you, nobody likes you. These are the starters that it's almost like priming the engine. If you bite that, then all of a sudden, people are plotting against you, they don't like you, your parents are just faking like they like you, and then it just keeps going. If you keep buying into it, it gets worse and worse and worse, and then the fear starts appearing. So it's like false evidence appearing real. What they can do is skew your perception to where when something happens in the environment, you interpret that in the most negative way possible, in the most fearful way possible. So you're sitting at home at night and you hear a noise outside. It's not just a noise outside. Suddenly it's somebody stalking you and they're going to break in and they're going to kill you. The more control they gain, the more horrible the hallucinations become. So as it progresses, especially if these guys are off meds, they'll see stuff like blood dripping from the walls, three-dimensional shadows walking around the rooms at night with it's either lime green eyes or red eyes. And they can walk through walls, monsters appearing in their room. Picture images of somebody going to kill them. One schizophrenic, several schizophrenic mothers said the voices were telling them if they didn't do what they told them to, they would murder their children. And that generated a lot of negative emotional energy from these guys. But it appeared that overall, what these things were doing were trying to create as much fear, anxiety, and negative emotion as possible. And at that point, I wasn't quite sure why. But I noticed that prisoners were telling me that when the voices appeared, their energy levels would drop down to almost nothing. And it was consistent. Every time the voices appeared, their energy levels dropped. Some of them even said, I can feel my energy leaving. But they could not make, and I saw this for years, but they could not make a connection between the voices and their energy level. And for years, I thought it was because of the constant anxiety and fear that was generated by these voices. And then a series of events happened where I saw very clearly in the maximum security block that that was not the case, that it was not the anxiety, it was not the paranoia that was causing this energy to leave. It was something else. So it was almost like I was led to read two books by different Native American shamans, and both of them were saying these entities, which matched what I was seeing and what Swedenborg was talking about, are parasitic. They can't, they survive off of eating or consuming negative emotional energy. They can't make it themselves, so they have to generate it from us, which explained why they would keep putting negative stuff in these guys' minds and doing everything they can to disturb them, and then that energy disappearing. You know, there's a link between schizophrenics and ourselves. I mean, it's a continuum. So we have our own minimal craziness that these things are injected into our minds, and what we do with it depends on how bad it's going to get. The schizophrenics are the far end of the normal curve, how bad it can possibly get. So we're all under attack by these things all the time. Right? And if you believe what psychiatry and the pharmaceutical industry are telling you, that this is all biochemical stuff, it's got nothing to do with any kind of spiritual anything, then we have a drug to fix it, we're being given a bad bill of goods. You know, this is a spiritual battle. It always has been. You know, people have known this, shamans have known this for tens of thousands of years. These things are attracted to violence and scary movies and that kind of stuff. They want that negative emotion to be generated.
There's a lot of things I want to talk about based on that. First of all, I mean, the story is fascinating, and obviously we just gave a little snippet of it there, but on our channel we've explored it at quite a lot of length. And
Yes.
we did it through the following shows: how to deal with evil spirits, how to free your mind from hell, the lies evil spirits tell us, do spirits play a role in addiction? All of those exploring heavily Swedenborg's reporting, and then Jerry's as well, where do they correlate, that kind of thing. I want to start talking about the spectrum he described. Because,
yes, right.
Because even though you can say, all right, spirits and everything, that's weird, I don't know, that is how thoughts behave. That you get these negative thoughts that are just like the ones he's telling you initially, and then if you start to buy into it, it does go deeper and deeper, and it does, and it definitely,
we've all experienced that.
Oh my gosh, it definitely, there is this tendency to like interpret the things in the worst way. I can't tell you how many times there's been some kind of event coming up, and there's been this little feeling of like, am I going to die at this? Or it's like something, and it never is, and it never is, and never is. So that
every time you travel or whatever.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's like, that happens in the human mind. He's providing this explanation for how it goes.
Yeah, and the part that was so fascinating to me about that, and I think you mentioned it mentioned something about it at the top of the show, they're actually eating it, like it's, this negative emotion is a food that these spirits cannot generate themselves. So we're like a farm animal or something, you know, and they want to generate this in us and then, you know, draw it out of us and feed on us. And when they do, we go to levels of exhaustion. I've heard Jerry talk before about levels of exhaustion that are far beyond, you know what I mean? Like you can't even stand up.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've felt that sometimes, you know, like such a severe attack of negative emotion that you can't even get off the couch for 2 hours or something, you know?
I bet that's how people feel right after watching the show.
Yeah, no doubt.
But no, I'm not trying to make light of it. Just like if I ever think of a joke, I'm like, gotta go with it. But it's a really good point. But I think again, it's a spectrum. Like you can go all the way to like this huge drain that rips your life away, which I think you do see in heavy cases of depression and schizophrenia and all the other associated things. But even when you're just in your regular little loops of anxiety, how much does that pull out of your ability to do constructive things? Does it eventually deteriorate your life?
Doesn't everybody experience the fact that those things are a loop? Like you can get stuck in a little loop of that negativity. Sometimes sometimes I feel like it's just sort of spiraling down, as I may have mentioned in another show, just gradually, just down, down, down from one point to another point to another.
Yes.
But I'm going down. I hardly even realize it.
Yep.
And to realize that, oh, that's something from outside of me, and it's actually preying on me. It's using me in that situation.
Like the best compass for me on this stuff is like, what's the net impact of adopting these beliefs? And I feel like that predator-prey sort of, or exploitative dynamic arms me with the right attitude to not worry about negative thoughts anymore.
Oh yeah, because there's things you can do, right?
When I feel like, okay, because if I just think of it as, oh, it's me generating these thoughts, or not even that I'm generating them, but I'm just observing reality, and reality is making me feel this way. I have no defense against it. I spiral. But if I'm feeling like, oh, this, not even for some reason compartmentalizing the idea of, oh my gosh, the spirit, but just like, okay, so this thing, hell is trying to mess with me, and they always try to do this, and I'm not going to give them the food they want because they're just trying to take my lunch money. That is the right ammunition to reject negative thoughts.
Yeah, just even a realization, like so often I can see where I can feel absolutely miserable. I can give you 20 reasons why I feel miserable.
Yeah.
And yet an hour ago or an hour from now, I'll feel great. And none of those circumstances has changed.
Nope, that's so well said.
So how compelling is that explanation?
Yes, exactly. Why is this thing front and center right now? Why is this bothering me right now when it didn't before? I agree with you totally on that. So what do you do? And
what do you do?
And not only when you're dealing with regular mind, but what do you do even if you do see a scary evil spirit? What do you do?
Right.
Because they're
what's
trying
the
to
antidote? Or like, is there something like people carry a pen or something?
Yes. What's the EpiPen to an evil spirit attack? Well, what's the opposite of fear? In some cases, it's humor. It's laughter. And we're going to go to our next guest interviews. Actually, we pulled it from this show that we did, The Lies Evil Spirits Tell Us. We interviewed a woman named Sherry Sweeney, and she was telling a story about when laughter or seeing how ridiculous these evil spirits can be changed something from being very scary to very empowering.
Interesting.
So the setup is she was trying to do it, like people sometimes try to do meditations to send positive vibes to something.
Send positive energy or something, pray for something.
We've had people like, we're all going to meditate to try to decrease violence or something. Right. She was doing this. There was a particular prison that she knew was having a lot of violence, and she was trying to send some energy there, as an experiment. Can I help mitigate some of the stuff these people are doing?
Right.
And as she was doing that, the following took place.
The best I can explain it is there was this energy, there was this presence in my room, in my apartment. And it was very dark and ominous. And so I hollered out to the presence, "Who are you?" Because I had this feeling. It was so thick that I just knew that it was something there. It wasn't just air. It was some kind of presence. The energy just got really, really, really super, super thick. And I'm not sure how to explain that because I'm kind of getting out of the normal English language for description. So I asked the energy, whatever you are, show yourself. And it was the most incredible and scary experience that I've ever experienced. And so what I saw was this mist that appeared like black smoke is the best I can describe it. It was kind of in a funnel shape, like a tornado kind of a shape. And so I hollered at it to go away. And of course, my heart was beating fast and I was afraid, and so as I got more fear, this thing started coming closer to me, and in my mind, I'm sensing the words coming from this being that was saying things like, who do you think you are sending energy to that prison? That one's mine, and now I'll destroy you. And so I can laugh now, but at the moment I wasn't laughing. I mean, I was really afraid. And so, but I still said to myself, and I said out loud, "That's a lie. You don't own anything. You don't have any power over me." But I was just saying the words. The feeling wasn't true because I was still afraid. And so the internal dialogue with me and this entity kind of continued on for a little bit. And the dark entity was saying to me, oh, really? It's you that's powerless. It's you that lives in fear and confusion. You're the one that dumped your children, which was a lie. You've got really stupid ideas. You can't solve anything, much less us. And then I said, that's a lie. You have no power over me. You're not welcome here. And so finally, things were starting to gel in my own mind in the midst of this fear. And the fear was kind of starting to subside a little bit because the entity wasn't actually physically attacking me. And it was just there. And the entity went on to tell me, you're stupid, you don't know anything at all, you're just confused, stay away from the prison, and I'll even help you get smart and confident and popular. Well, then I knew. I knew this guy, this entity is telling all kinds of lies. It's manipulating me. How he said that, or how it said that, somehow struck my funny bone. I'm a Monty Python fan, so I kind of I enjoy the weird kind of insane comedy that they put on. So it struck me in that fashion, and I laughed out loud. I laughed. And when I did that, all my fear disappeared. And when I even said, very funny, you're an idiot, you're wasting your time here, what a moron you think you are to have any control over me, and I laughed again. Well, then that cloud disappeared. It just poof, vanished. And so that gave me a greater understanding of how to deal with these things. And I started thinking of the biblical phrase that goes something like, greater is he that's in me than he that's in the world. I'm not a religious person, but I had done a lot of studies in the Bible. And so that just popped into my head. And when that happened, next thing I sensed was, of me saying to the presence, I send you love. I have no idea why I said that, but it worked. And that entity vanished instantly.
So there you have humor being a really effective tool. And just not even like humor like I'm going to tell you a joke, evil spirit, but just finding the thing ridiculous, mocking. And not like she didn't intend to do it, but she just suddenly had this moment of clarity, like, this guy is bluffing.
This is absurd.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so you see there, and it's interesting that she says, I'm not a religious person, but this Bible thing popped into my head.
Right.
Because you do get, it does seem like biblical stuff. Not exclusively biblical stuff, but that does have some power. There are a lot of people that report the name of Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Helps out. Also the 23rd Psalm. A lot of people will say repeating that almost like a mantra has a great effect on there. And we're spending a lot of time talking about this scary stuff, but it's because we're trying to help out. If you are having experiences, we're trying to help. But if you're just struggling with the thought side like the rest of us, we can apply these same techniques. You can laugh at the train of thought that tries to convince you that you're worthless and life is hopeless.
And can realize that it has an agenda. Like it was so amazing in that story that the being who was talking to her had a stake in the prison being a miserable place. And so you have no right to interfere here,
That's the missing ingredient, because if you, I feel like the thing Swedenborg taught me that's been the most powerful crowbar in my mind is this idea of stuff has an agenda.
Yeah.
Because without it, if you don't know, and that's just like how it would be in life, if something came up to you and was messing with you, but you didn't understand, they're trying to steal my wallet. If you don't understand the motive, you don't know why you should push back.
You get fooled by, that's right.
So we have a couple of more pieces of video that might be helpful to you. We did a short video called How to Detach from Fear, which is a way to calm the fear down, since fear is this leverage point. And also, about 450 years ago, I did a little speech here I watched it. I look quite different in it. Called The Fear Eater, Why Life Isn't As Fun As It Should Be. And it was based on some of this Jerry Marzinski, Swedenborg stuff that I've been finding out. But that said, let's get out of the negative. Let's find something happy. Yeah, it was all negative.
All triggered by Swedenborg.
Yes.
And scary spirits in the garden trying to persuade him not to cultivate it.
Exactly.
Which is kind of like, hey, don't clean up the prison or something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't clean it up. But that's not how it was supposed to be with this spiritual and physical worlds. That tree we're showing, it was supposed to be a happy, functional tree. And we're going to go now to a couple of quotes that Swedenborg gave about positive gardening-related spiritual experiences. So this is the first one from Spiritual Experiences 4399. By experiences, I have been instructed that good spirits and angels are not only present with human beings, that feels better.
That's nice, yeah.
But even reside in their feelings.
In their feelings, wow.
We're getting crazy again, but to the other direction. For every feeling has great extension, meaning, like
it radiates out.
It is a plane. It somehow can be inhabited.
Yeah. It's roomy enough that they can fit in there. Yeah,
and because the ultimate plane is with human beings and their feelings, therefore, this happens when, I was just pausing for dramatic effect. This happens when the Lord enlivens.
It wasn't an awkward silence.
That's that icebreaker. And this happens when the Lord enlivens and then arranges them. Just as good spirits are in the affection for gardening, where they have little abodes. So gardeners, 1 point for you. Swedenborg is saying, not just that good spirits can like a garden, but in the love you have for tending and making a garden, that can be like a little spiritual home for something good.
So many people feel so good, like after a few hours spent in the garden, you just like your thoughts aren't as sort of crazy, and you feel sort of more mellow and. Yeah.
Right. And so let's go farther into Swedenborg describing this, the dwelling of spirits in the good affections, and that will go along with this beautiful arch imagery we have behind us. This is SE, Spiritual Experiences 4142. Sometimes while sleeping, I have observed in my own garden. While sleeping,
while he's sleeping.
It's multitasking. But that means he's in sort of sleeping and in the spirit now.
Right.
In my own garden, several abodes of laborers. With arched stone entrances at ground level and neatly constructed rooms within. I was surprised that they were there in the garden without my knowing it.
People living in. I mean, basically, he was living there alone. He had a gardener and a cook and so on who lived with him. But yeah.
Similarly, there were abodes also at a second height, to which one had to ascend by ladders, and at a third where there were shepherds, meadows, and groves.
Shepherds.
And I'm sure that's symbolic, the different levels, and at the top one has shepherds.
Right, a multi-leveled garden.
Natural, spiritual, celestial, or heavenly. Last night also I dreamt vividly that there was an abode at the ground level in the garden, with a room that I saw, and I spoke in the dream with him who dwelt there. When I awoke, so this is the difference. So he could just be reporting a dream like we report a dream, right? But then he says, when I awoke, I spoke with them. So they are real, they're spirits that he can then talk to once he wakes up.
Right.
Who replied as if in their sleep. Near the ground there were workers with whom there was a discussion about a census. This is the Journal of Spiritual. These are Swedenborg's notes to himself that we're prying into. So there's all kinds of like stream of consciousness.
And you wonder if the
stuff.
census is just like, how many people live in this garden anyway?
Yeah, but it's positive. It's something comforting and beautiful and almost like fairy-like.
Good spirits and labor. People who are working and getting cultivation done.
And that's the orderly way. Good spirits and angels are supposed to connect to our good feelings.
It strikes me that it may be that those evil spirits earlier on in the show who didn't want him to cultivate that space were upset about the very fact that these other types were coming in there who love, let's get to work. I love this. Let's work the garden and everything. Yeah, that's right.
So we're going to hit you with one more quote, and this one has some baggage with it because Swedenborg uses the term medium in it.
Oh, but he means something a little different, doesn't he?
These days, you mean medium means like a human being who can channel spirits.
Or something like
that.
But
he's using it meaning a spirit who is sort of an ambassador for a whole society of spirits.
Oh, like what you might call an intermediary or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, he says this is a way the societies communicate with each other, and these are, in this case, good societies. So we talked about that whole idea of Swedenborg's mediumship in this Spiritual Questions Answered, Mediums, Narcissists, and Absolute Truth episode. You can check that out. Hey, look at those nice people.
Good title there.
Yep. In this quote, we're talking about positive mediums and how they connect these groups. So this is Spiritual Experiences 4271. The title is in bold. Good spirits and angels even more delight in being with a person on earth who is caring.
So angels like it even better than good spirits do.
Right.
They delight in being with a person on earth who is caring.
They just love hanging
like
around.
A loving, kindly person.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are spirits with a person on earth, also angels, good spirits with those who are caring, which spirits are mediums of many societies.
Oh, so you might have just a few of these spirits, but they're connected to a whole host of other good folks up there.
I represent these people.
Yeah,
the things that stream from the angels are received according to the person's quality or love.
Isn't that sort of basic downtown Swedenborg right there?
Yes. Like there's all this stuff coming in, but depending on who we are, we see them, we receive them differently.
Yeah.
When he or she is imbued with charity or love, life with the angels is joyful and delightful, for they have a connection with the mental imagery of the person's memory, for they are grounded in it.
Yeah, there was something about that in the Ghost Show, too, about connecting with Swedenborg's mental imagery of objects in his room and so on.
Yep.
That seems to be a point of connection. So I see the flower, and then there's a mental image about the flower, and then somebody's connecting with that mental image.
And in this sense, in a good way, this is a connection you very much want to have.
Right, that's right.
Therefore, angels and spirits can have a joyful life there. It is different with an evil person because the receiving vessels are contrary, into which good things can indeed flow through the angels, but are corrupted, so that they cannot stay there on account of the repugnances that are sensed.
Well, it'd be nice to be that kind of garden where the evil spirits don't want to be, because it's repugnant, you know.
Yeah, there you go. So you can cultivate the garden of your mind, get the right kind of spirits and angels to move in, and life is good. So the takeaway is that it's not as scary as you think. The evil stuff is the evil spirits aren't as powerful as they are. The concepts that are terrorizing you are false.
There are tools that you can use.
And there's good out there too, and more good than bad in the end. All right, so hope that was the weirdest section maybe we've ever done of any show. If you take it all in composite, so hopefully you got some questions from that. If so, you're in luck because we're going to do our live.
At least enjoyed the flowers or something. But
we're going to do our live Q&A right now. Surprise! We have a special guest with us. Cara Dom is here, Latin consultant for the New Century Edition. Thanks so much, Cara, for stopping in.
Certainly.
And whoever cleared these flowers off did a great job as well. I don't know if you know them or whatever, but what we're going to do now with all
that
three
was
of
some
our
useful laborer in the garden.
Oh man! So
maybe that third level laborer.
That's right. Well, with all of our powers combined, we're going to try our best to respond to what hopefully is a bunch of puzzled people after the previous section. So we'll see what they've got going on. And if you're in the chat room, get your questions in now because we actually are getting questions from you at this moment. And to prove it, here's our first one. This is Mary Richards who asks, what happens when these evil spirits do not get fed? So we were talking before about how evil spirits kind of hang around people to try to get them to be fearful in a certain way. What happens if they don't get a rise out of us? What happens if we don't do what they want? You guys have any thoughts on that?
My first thought is that they disappear.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's not feeding them. Just not feeding them is not quite the same as saying, I see you, get out of here.
Yeah.
But I guess another possibility is that they would keep at you for a while.
Right.
Well,
I think
recognizing them seems to be the most powerful thing.
Sure, right. I think about there was a cat that lived around our house when I was younger, and as soon as we fed it, it was there.
Yours.
But if you go a long time with no food, eventually, wait, there's no food here. But I like how you made that distinction between that sort of level one. Making yourself not worth it to come around to is you don't feed. Level 2 is I'm calling the cops when you show up, or animal control.
Yeah,
but not that we would do that to that poor cat. Okay.
And Swedenborg talks about that there are these cavernous workhouses he talks about, and he says that evil spirits are driven in there by their hunger, and if they don't work, they don't eat.
Yeah.
So I think if they're not eating us, there still is food for them, eating our negative emotions. You know, there still is food, but they get that food out of actually the satisfaction of doing some work in these places. So there's some sort of food, and they're driven there by their hunger.
If they can't rip you off, they have to go get a job.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right.
There we go. That's awesome. Okay, so Mary, thanks so much for the question. There's our Swedenborgian answer. Excellent, everyone. Let's look at the next one. This is from Zeke. He asks, I've never understood why spirituality was made so complex. Why not just simplify? I think we as humans like to overanalyze, and that's cool, I guess, if it brings you happiness, but I like simple. And I would add that I love it when you come to something simple out of complex elements. Mm-hmm. Because life is unavoidably complex. I mean, like, there's so much to it. Just like having a body, you've got not just arms, but 10 fingers on each hand, and you've got all your different senses. Just navigating and moving around is using all these elements, but the actual walking across the room feels like it's like one thing. So how do we take all this? One thought that makes me think of is, how do we take all of this spiritual stuff we learn and turn it into, if we were to turn all Swedenborg stuff into one thing, you know, what would that be? Or what would that, you know, what sorts of things are the core of it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing that occurs to me is love.
I like it. Yeah.
And after being a Swedenborgian for 59 years, it took me about 59 years to get to the simplicity of the way Swedenborg lays out those loves. Love of the Lord, love of the neighbor, love of worldliness, or love, you know, for ourselves alone, that kind of thing. And that simple, like 4 bullet points thing is so cool if you can just hang on to that. It gets you through a lot of sort of mess in your mind if you can use that to help analyze what's going on.
That's awesome. Absolutely. Jonathan?
Well, I have a weird analogy, which is that in music, in the high notes, you can play a lot of notes together. You can make all these complicated chords with flat ninths and and all these complicated.
I'll take your word for it.
Like that. But in the left hand on a piano or the low notes, you can't do chords. You can't play notes that are close together. Basically, you just play one root note.
Okay.
I think that image of the high notes is like truth. I think truth is complex.
Yeah.
I think it has many, many different facets, and it really covers all of reality. But I think love is very simple, and it's like those notes in the left hand. There's just one note. There's just one bass note. Yeah. Most of the time, bass players are just playing one note.
Yeah.
And they shift to a different note with a different chord, but it's like that one root that holds everything together. And so I think love is the simplicity, as Cara so eloquently said. That's when you move. We start out in truth for a long time, but when you get to love, it gets simple. And I've been thinking lately about how love is the same, I think, for everybody under all circumstances. You know what I mean? There's a similarity of love. It's a unifying thing.
Yeah. Oh, and I think about, the Swedenborg path is got all these like facts in it, or thoughts or ideas, but trying to some of them don't seem like, how do you live by that? But trying to keep them all in your mind at once seems to me impossible. I do agree that like you said, Cara, grab onto one or something that is really livable, and then I find if I just load my mind with the other ones, like the stuff we've been talking about in this show about the nature of how evil spirits behave, when I know that the basic principle, and in the right situation, sometimes these little ones I'll remember them, and that just gives me this extra leverage. It's like the pulling is the love, but all this truth stuff is where you put your fingers to get the maximum grip or something like that.
Yeah, and that biblical phrase, yea, yea, nay, nay, which I think really at heart, that's what we're talking about tonight, is like, hey, if something's coming into your presence and trying to terrify you or beating you up in your thoughts or whatever it is, nay, nay, if it's something loving and constructive or whatever, yay, yay. And that's really all you need to know. It becomes that simple.
Very good. All right, cool. Zeke, hopefully that's interesting at some level. Okay, so let's take a look at our next lovely question. This is from John May. He says, how does I think, therefore I am equate with regard to spiritual influences? Who or what is thinking? How is it that I think? Which is a serious question with Swedenborg, because he sure does think it's important to know who's doing what, right? How does that strike you guys?
Jonathan?
I just love that. This is such a great question.
It is a great one.
Yeah, because Swedenborg does sort of cause you to question that idea.
Yeah.
You're like, I get what was being said there, that because you experience thought, you know that you exist. You know, there was a whole debate about how do I know what reality is? How do I know? I mean, my senses could be lying to me. Maybe there's no other people sitting beside me or something like that. But the fact that I think is some evidence that something's going on.
And YouTube's analytics could be lying. We could think there's a whole audience watching this, but there's not. And we're just going to sit there.
That's right. We're happier not knowing. But the Swedenborg casts doubt on like where that's coming from. He even says sometimes that there are tens of thousands of angels that participate in every thought that we have.
Yeah.
And yet, I'll have Jonathan thoughts, you have Cara thoughts, you have Curtis thoughts. You know,
sometimes.
We do have different, we have our nature reflects in different ways in the way that we think. But I just want to celebrate the question. I thought that was a great question.
Yeah. I've struggled with that myself. It's just, who am I? What is my identity? And at one point I just got it down to that it's my power of choice. Because I can say no thanks to those thoughts, or sure, I'll hang on to these thoughts. But it's a good one.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, so it's this interesting dynamic where Swedenborg is both saying like there's a lot less self than we think there is, but on the other hand, everybody, he stresses over and over, everybody's unique, and you can never have two people who are the same to eternity.
That's
so
right.
you think about so if we're all unique, we think of how many unique parts we must have in order for there to be currently 8 billion people on the planet, and none of them are the same. So it can't just be a human being that has 4 characteristics, because then they don't. So how many do we have? But the fact that we're not the same as anybody who's ever been in history, our spirit, and then everyone who's yet to come, so that we must be infinitely complexly unique, right? So it's this weird, and that even though he makes this other astonishing claim that the more angelic you become, the more individual you feel. Even though you know God is the one my life is coming out of, you feel more and more like I'm the source of life. And my final rant about this is this whole setup with spiritual influence and angels. This is not how it was originally designed. If I am reading right,
there was a general influx before.
It used to be like it was God straight to us.
Right.
That's how it worked.
Right.
But because humanity got messed up and all obsessed with materialism and selfishness, that's why this is sort of duct tape to do this, like thinking from others. So I mean, maybe we're getting back there, and that feels like, okay, I could see that it's God into me, and I'm a little stream of God. But I'm myself, but my life, that seems less like I'm erased than something else. So.
Yeah, and I would just add one additional thought, if I may, that I think Swedenborg, to the idea, I think, therefore I am, he would say, I love, therefore I think.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's something primary to thought. That sort of privileges thought at the heart of everying.
Yeah.
But he said, oh no, your thoughts are just, look at it. If you have no affection for something, can you even think about it or something? So.
Yeah.
And also he'd say, I love, and that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Love is our life.
Yes.
Right.
And everyone's love is unique.
I'm glad we went on that
good.
little kick at the end, because I think that's really important. That it's not the thought that defines, according to Swedenborg, and this was a big shock to him because he was a big thinker.
Yeah, a big thinker.
But he's like wrong. And the core of who we are, maybe this uniqueness really lies in the way we love. Not just the way we love people, but the way we love the way we feel about the ideas that come into us is uniquely us, and sort of informs our
passions for certain sort of usefulness or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey man, money's worth on that one. Thanks so much, Zeke, for starting that up. Let's do one more before we go here. Okay, this is Karna Elohim asks, how do evil spirits have access to our minds? And this is how do they? I don't want to explain it. You guys explain it. So what is it? And do it without using inherited evil. Just kidding.
Somebody else got to kick this one off. Sorry, guys.
Sure. No, I I guess the reason I say inherited evil is there's a couple ways you could take this. How do evil spirits have access to our minds? The one that Swedenborg gives as to why we are in proximity to evil spirits in the first place is that I love, therefore I think, or I love, therefore I am. We are naturally born with inclinations to love harmful things. And it's not like we are all out there looking like creatures from horror movies, but just a simple act of like, well, he left and there's his cake. You know, like I want this thing that's, and like I enjoy everyone thinking I'm cooler than this person. That's the kind of stuff that attracts evil spirits. So stuff, the ego stuff that we would consider normal is this attractant. And the point of regeneration and rebirth is to shed that stuff and kind of cut this access off more and more.
And yes, go.
Okay. I just had another thought that how do they have access to our minds? The whole thing about spiritual freedom, which Swedenborg says is the Lord loves that more than anything. Like the apple of his eye, he guides our guards our spiritual freedom above everything else. So because he would just have us all love everybody and love everything good and love the God and love heaven. But he actually wants us to be free to opt in or not.
Yeah.
So there's that balance. So we have to have access to the evil side so that we can choose. We get to put it in the balance and choose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like your freedom to eat ice cream or cake, but I'm going to lock the cake in a chest and you're never going to get it. You know?
Right.
Totally,
And my answer would be that it just seems to be built in, like such a mind-boggling thing that Swedenborg says, is that our minds are actually non-physical. They may attach to a physical brain, but the mind is non-physical. I like that word extension in one of those quotes tonight. And that our minds live in the spiritual world. So in a certain way, there's no way to prevent, like it's built in. Our minds live where evil spirits are and where good spirits are.
Yeah.
So the connection with spirits is part of the whole mechanism, and that's how we have human thoughts and human feelings is through this connection with the spiritual world. And as you say, because of hereditary evil and free choice and so on, we have to have access to that as well as the other, and then we can make a choice.
It's kind of like why do scammers have access to our credit cards? Because we're just using the same systems that they prowl on.
Yes.
And so this is this stuff. Right. So the whole how annoying it is to have to shut down a credit card and all that is just because there's people who are jerks. Or whatever pushed into it. Maybe somebody has a good reason to do it, but everybody pays the price for that. And it's kind of the same thing.
We don't want to just have cash under the mattress or something.
That's right.
If we're going to be online.
Right. So same thing with, because a lot of people are loving evil and hanging on to it and being predatory, we all kind of have this problem. So there's a lot of different ways to answer that, and we did them all.
Yes, all of them.
Every single one.
All right, it's so fun getting to hear what's on all of your minds, and we're going to just keep the ball rolling. Because remember in the beginning, we were all answer this question, answer our icebreaker question.
I remember
we
that.
are now going to get to what you answered in our final section. All right, so we got to. We have made a solemn promise that we would hear what everybody had to say. So let's see. The question again, in case everybody forgot it, is: have you had a time when you saw a ghost or felt consciously visited by a spirit? What was it like? And so I gave a sort of a lame answer to it, but let's see what everybody else gave. The results are in. Okay, so looks like we got some stories. A few days after my beloved sister died, I was alone at home in the bath and heard 7 loud knocks from the basement.
Wow.
And I wonder if that number
That's
had
a good one.
significance. Oh yes, it cannot be mistaken for anything else. It is a shiver coming from deep inside.
That's a good way to put it.
There's a heaviness and a change in the energy in the room.
Nice.
A ghost levitated me once and then ran scared when I said the name of Jesus. So
that's another one on the list.
That thing popping up.
That's right.
Okay, so then our apartment is haunted. I have seen him. We just call him the dude. LOL.
Laugh out loud.
Yeah. What's up, the dude abides. A year after my mom died, I felt her hug me on my birthday.
Oh,
and I think That's common to like somebody you love, you feel.
And interesting how it'll be an anniversary, like they've got a calendar up there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, or that you're thinking about them more. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes I have that feeling I am being watched. Then I try to see with my eyes. Right. So you get
that's
something's
right.
going on.
Yeah. So that's that sort of tingly feeling, like what's up.
Yep. Got a visit from my daughter in a dream, but I guess that is different than a ghost. But still, like, there's some dreams that you feel like something's going on.
No, definitely.
We dream all the time, and we know when we wake up and we're like, there's something different in the quality.
I was actually communicating with somebody.
No ghosts or aliens, but I'm open to both. Okay, so there's an advertisement. I do always hope that I see a UFO. I don't think I've ever seen one. When I'm driving this night, there's always a part of me that's like, come on, let's just see like a really blatant.
Is that one right there?
UFO, Yep. I heard a hello in my left ear, turned around and no one was there. I left the house.
Wow.
Yep.
Interesting.
Saw my grandfather in a dream. It was so real and calm and lucid.
Cool.
Felt it, never spooky.
I like that word calm there.
Yep. Good. It's not all bad.
No.
Felt it, never spooky. Bed squeaks as if someone is sitting on it, or floors will creak.
That's right.
I was visited by spirits. I had contact and conversation. That's why Swedenborg is important for me. So I understand that I am not going nuts.
That's right.
I feel acceptance and love of this worldview. Amen. So if it's the truth, isn't all of what we're discovering in life is like, people need to have their experiences heard of all kinds, and the people need to be, if something's true, they need to be validated. Yeah. So the next thing, I was staying at a relative's house in South Carolina. It was an old Confederate mansion. I was particularly upset about something and had been crying. Then I saw this green orb, and it comforted me.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes, sometimes they and you'd think an orb would be scary, but something, it can have a very particular
calming feeling. Yeah, then the feeling is such a crucial piece of it.
Yes, sometimes they speak directly in our ears. I heard, I don't like you. I was like, that was not me. But I was not scared. I was in my room. It's my place. The ghost has to go. Right.
That's right.
That's a
territory thing.
Very, like, hey, I know what I'll say to
now,
this
that's
person.
more transparent than they often are. Just say, I don't like you. Just
that's right. Not, you don't like yourself.
Right.
I saw my grandfather's face, which was like a big screen while I was talking about him with my aunt. When my father died, I walked into my mom's kitchen and I felt my father's presence, but I could not see him.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think this is the last one. I heard footsteps going up the stairs and stopping on the top level, along with my dog growling at the same time it hit the top step. It didn't make any noise after that. It was my girlfriend's house. So that's something memorable. I don't know if
the dog seems to be reacting.
Right, which is a whole nother investigation. I don't know if it was a spirit, but when my good friend died, I saw a light hit the wall and then left. I've had many experiences. Anytime I'm ever afraid, I picture Jesus in my mind and remember, he is with me at all times. I recommend the Lord's Prayer to people at times they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a very good recommendation too.
Hey, and that's what we want to do, because recommendations, people pick something up that's helpful to them, or they want to share, or they want to be heard. And this person's saying, hey, this is happening to me in my life. Hearing Swedenborg describe it is making me feel like, okay, I'm a legitimate thing. So that's important. That's another aspect of this, doing this show. Right. And I'm always trying to find reasons to justify us doing this show. Whether or not we've come up with them, I want to say thanks so much to both of you for hanging out.
Fun, Curtis.
Thank you to the whole audience. If you want to help our show out, please like and subscribe. It's a harmless little thing that lets YouTube know that there is a point to the show. And then if you want to support us, we're a nonprofit. If you want to make it so we can do programs like this, consider joining us on Patreon. Right now we have this really exciting thing where we got this generous grant from a foundation that allows us to match at 5-to-1 any new donations to Patreon. So if you're not on and you join, Swedenborg Foundation gets 5 times that money. Or if you're on and you increase your donation just a little bit, it'll go 5 times as far.
Whoa.
That will help us do stuff like buy flowers for this show. No, I think those were donations.
Those are some nice flowers.
They are nice flowers. So that's our show. Next week we'll be back with, we're doing this fluctuation between our pre-recorded high-density show and then the live sort of processed show. So next week, we'll be back with a pre-recorded show, same time, and we're going to be looking at overcoming divisiveness. Argument. How do we disagree while staying civil? A good topic for the times. And believe it or not, there's a lot of spiritual commentary on it. So hope to see y'all there, and have a great week.
Swedenborgian Life is Amy Aquarola, Morgan Beard, Curtis Childs, Karen Childs, Matthew Childs, Alexa Cole, John Connolly, Cara Dom, Chris Dunn, Stuart Farmer, Ben Keys, Reed McCardle, Chelsea Odner, Jonathan Rose, Shiloh Silverman, and Shada Sullivan.